Are we live?
We are live, yes.
We are live. Hello, I'm Norris from Change Innovators.
And I am Dawna Atamanchuk with Change Innovators.
And today we're going to have a conversation about something that's come onto our radar, partly because of what's been happening in the UK for me, and some amazing things that have happened around actions people have taken to really enhance human connection in spite of some adversity. And it's a core part of what we do as an organization, especially in leadership, to try and emphasize the importance of human connection. So I shared a link with Dawna today. What did you think of that link, Dawna?
I thought it was very interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting when you said you were sending me a link. So I can actually show people, this is the link we're referring to, and we can put it in the chat box. But it moved me because it was actually from the individuals that had to make some choices. There was something going on. They wanted to respond to it differently. It intrigued me that they actually stopped to wait some time. We start talking about the power of human connection. It's like, does it have to be immediate and fast? And they actually slow down to make some choices. But it surprised me because I was not expecting it to be a story, the one that you shared. But it also made me just realize I have a preconceived bias and maybe what I was expecting, right? It's kind of where we're talking about today. I already had my expectations of what was going to be, and when it wasn't, what it actually did for me was it made me focus more because it was different.
Yeah.
Like I was more, for myself, I was actually more intrigued because it was different.
Yeah. And one of the reflections for me, we talked about bias. So bias is a thing that can lead to all sorts of assumptions being made, which is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
And we do some work with Dr. Carlos Davadovich, who's written a book called Five-Brained Leadership. And what he's shown us is that bias is a form, I think if I understand it right, if I understand it correctly, bias is really stems from kind of a fear response, and it's about self-preservation and protection. And when we experience something that we perceive to be different, then naturally we're wary of that. And that's really, really deeply ingrained in us. Yeah? It's part of our physiology. But because we have this capacity to feel and in particular think these days, use our cerebral cortex to think, we've got the capacity to overcome that. And the other thing that's really interesting to me is that it's familiarization that lowers that instinctive response. So the more we experience things which are different, the less fearful we actually are. And with the riots that happened in the UK, you'll see that that's what this video clip was about. What really struck me is that people were fearful, but they didn't really understand why they were fearful or what they were really doing there. And it was the bravery of the imam reaching out that made such a big difference, because it was geared around compassion and love and understanding, right?
Yeah, many people probably would have, I don't really know for certain, but many people would have just stayed on their side. They wouldn't have tried to cross it. They wouldn't have those conversations about the power of human connection and saying like, okay, well, right now it's not safe for us to do it, but if we wait a little bit of time, then we can start to cross that line, and we can take it slowly, right?
Yeah.
That is when you start to think about the biases we have and breaking them down to understand them, because they do protect us in a way.
Yeah.
But they also limit our ability to be able to connect with people that are different or hold different thoughts and opinions than us. So we talk in the program about mental contrasting, and in what we're actually trying to do here is how can I hold different thoughts and ideas that challenge the way I see something.
Yeah. And so part of it is about understanding that our perspective is not the truth, it's our truth.
Yes.
and if we share our truth with people, and then we listen to what they have to say about that in an open way, in a way that means we're genuinely listening, then we can move closer towards maybe a shared understanding or a better connection. You know, what we're hoping for is a better connection at a deeply human level, because we're just human beings after all, right?
Mm-hmm. And as the idea about that listening, you know, even for myself the other day, you know, like I was in a situation where I was expecting people to have more empathy about something. And I said, like, I just don't hear any empathy in your voice. Instead of me, I made a statement, right? I have a bias I bring to the conversation. When potentially if I had put my coaching hat on and asked a coaching question,
Yeah.
I may have allowed that person to express their empathy in their way. It just I wasn't seeing it in my way. And so as we go through our daily lives, those situations create conflict. You know, nothing as big as shown in this video, but in our day-to-day lives is that conflict of stopping conversation, you know, instead of continuing conversation, to be curious and being humble that I don't know, right?
There was a real sense of humility in that video that you know we put on there for people to look at, is and a curiosity about why do you hate me? You know, I don't know you.
Yes.
and I, as we were preparing to come on, and you were saying to me about, you know, how does this manifest itself in the everyday? Something popped into my head, which was about trust. And sometimes, you know, it's when we meet people for the first time, you know, we're all different in terms of how we trust. But I was also thinking about how trust breaks down, and how then we create biases as a result of that. So people that maybe we were once okay with, if there's been a bit of a breakdown of trust, then actually
Right.
that's another way of generating a fear response. And then suddenly you're being biased towards people. You know, you're not wanting to talk to people, or you're excluding people, when the best thing to do really is to put your ego here and open up a channel of communication. You know, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, they say it doesn't take, and I don't know where the research comes from, but it doesn't take long for us to decide how we're going to, or how we're going to put someone into a certain spot, you know, consciously or unconsciously. And we may make the choice of saying, I'm putting that person here, but we might do it just without it. So how is it that the next time I come into a situation with that person, or somebody similar to that person who represents them, how is it that I can stay open, so I'm not just naturally in my brain funneling people into that spot? Because if I'm doing that, then I'm missing this idea of human connection. Because when you can actually sit down and find similarities between us, because there's so many similarities between us, if we can find those and we look for them, that allows us to have those human connections. You know, it doesn't matter about all the differentiating factors that are out there. I don't want to list them. I don't want to label them, because that's what we do. But instead, just sort of look and just really identify, like, what makes us similar. And it could be our values. It could be something we support. But what makes us similar as human beings to get along. And when we can do that, then we understand our biases differently. But also, if we're always around people that are like us, I don't know if this concept of pushing our biases is really challenged. And even you and I just talking a little bit about not eating at our desk, you know, and the ideas of the different places you sat. Not everybody in your position would go and do that, right? Because they have a bias. But for you, it was no big deal, right?
No, I suppose what I was talking about is recognizing, because I was in a senior management position, right? But I was recognizing that people look to others to kind of make sense of what you in inverted commas should and shouldn't do, you know. And in organizations, I think that is really important, because we have these things called mirror neurons as well, that are linked to, if I understand it correctly, there's a theory that links that to a couple of things. One is the acceleration of human learning. So, people observe things, and then they're able to kind of, without actually experiencing it for themselves, to sort of observe that and take that on. It's also linked to empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, that's really important, because what that means is that we transmit information around through these mirror neurons, okay, and we do it, and it moves fast in organizations. And what I mean by that is that if we show a care, if we're a person that is influencing others, if we show a love and compassion towards individuals, because others observe that, what actually happens is we show love and compassion towards others because they experience that, they empathize with that. Whereas if we chastise people or we exclude people, then actually we're not just chastising that individual, which the other people also feel that. You understand what I mean by that, Dawna? That actually
100%. Yeah, 100%. And even your actions will challenge my biases, because I'll see you doing something like I wouldn't do that. Like, I couldn't imagine doing that. And then I see you doing it time and time again, and you're having some form of success. And I won't label what that is, because it can be many different things. Even, you're having a success in some ways. So when we demonstrate love and connection to others, then they have the ability to give it. And then we're also challenging our biases on how we should interact with the different people we find through our days.
So I never used to eat my lunch at my desk, because I was,
we were just talking about that, right?
Other people. And
yes.
thinking, well, if I eat my lunch at my desk, do other people, through their mirror neurons and everything, think, well, actually, that's what we do around here. Whereas, I would prefer to go, and for me, would prefer to go and eat my food in a space that was more social, and we'd always invite people to come and join me and so on.
But I think it's important to realize that other people probably have a bias towards your behavior, and others may not have felt in favor of what you were doing for whatever reason. And so it's these small choices, right? It's the small choices of us doing things that are not the norm, that maybe might not be comfortable at first. Like maybe the first time you walked into that room, you're like, okay, there's none of my peers here. And even subconsciously, maybe it was just stepping into that. And part of this power of a human connection is really us creating spaces where we are uncomfortable and getting comfortable with them.
And being intentional about it. I know we use that word very often.
Yes.
But it's very easy, isn't it, to sort of, oh, I'm hungry, therefore, and I'm busy. And what I'm going to do, even though I haven't really thought about it, is sit at my desk and eat my food, because that's it. But what is that saying? What messages is that giving? Is that, because human connection is happening all of the time. People are observing all of the time. They are sensing, they're making sense of things, making assumptions. So it is also about being aware, but it's also about being open to somebody saying to you or noticing something and offering it to you. As I noticed this, we often talk about trying not to be judgmental, and often we do. Why are you doing that? As opposed to, I'm curious about the fact that you do that. Can we talk about it? It would be okay, because I want to know a bit more about that. Which is a far away.
Right, but to do that, we have to, to do that idea though of being curious, like we have to slow down, right? We have to be intentionally slowing down. You know what I mean? We need to be making that time and space so that we can actually connect with people. We need to be humble, like all the things we've been talking about. So those examples of where you actually say to somebody like, I am interested, could you explain that to me? And someone's like, well, don't you know? In there, like that's the visual I feel I get sometimes. It's like, well, I know from my perspective, but I actually don't know from your perspective. And the if you go to our Change Innovators LinkedIn page, there's this you can find the video, and there's been a post put there, and it talks about that idea of traveling and how exploring things and going places that are different than what and what we can really learn from them. When I was when we were together and I was in London, and you go to a restaurant, and next thing you know, I'm sitting at a table as a single person, and other people are on dates at my family table. And I was like, what do I do? Right? That moment of like that bias I have of, should I get up and leave? Am I interfering on their dates? that you take about that in a work environment, right? People are having some meetings, they're having conversation, you're sitting at a workspace where you're working. What's your biases that you bring to that? How do you think you're supposed to show up? Is it okay for me to be there? And that things about traveling, which is what's in the post. And I mean, I really resonate with that. Like every time you put yourself in a new country with new ideas and you accept them and just take them and experience them. For me, that's where a lot of that bias is really, I've learned to stretch that, look at it differently, soften it. We both love to travel. So we both have many experiences of where we've been in awe of something we learned.
Yeah. And I'm mindful of what you were saying earlier about bringing it back to the everyday, which is what you've done. And I was, it's miles away from where we started off in the video with the imam and the protesters and so on. But what you described there is being curious about yourself. So what's going on for me that I'm having this reaction, and but being forgiving and non-judgmental towards yourself as well, because actually somewhere in there'll be a reason why that's happening. And so if we can become curious, and I mean genuinely curious about what we're experiencing, is actually the route into understanding what the bias is, or what the narrative is, or what the story is that we've been told, that may have no bearing at all on what is a truth from the different perspectives. So what's interesting
about that is, I often think about it, is that we can choose how we see a situation. So it could have been that I was having dinner and had no one, or else it was like I'm in London enjoying this. But it actually makes me think sometimes of, like, you've been married longer than myself, but I've been married for a while. And I sometimes I wonder what my first date was like, or what those initial dates were like when I was with, like, do you know what I mean? Actually, it's like, I wish somebody could have sat there and then told me what it was like watching. Just like, for me, it was more like, this is really cool, right? I know this one couple over here was just on a new date. I could gather that. We were so close, I could hear them talking. I was trying to close my ears, but super hard. But for me, it was almost like, we can choose how to see that. But it actually just makes me think about, like, those first couple of dates or things like that with my partner, right? With my husband, and just sort of that, it took me an opportunity just to reflect on that, right? Which I never would have had the chance if I hadn't been sitting at this table by myself and you downtown, London. If there's a place to eat at dinner time, you just take it, right? It's so busy.
Yeah. But am I understanding you in that, what you're saying is you kind of have to work at it a bit as well. It's not, human connection, and being married is a whole other story.
Yes.
We've been married a long time. So, and boy, oh boy, it's great when you can say I've been married for, however many years, but we know that it's something that you have to work at. And most of the time it's that relationship with who you are that is the thing that actually gets you through it, because building a relationship with another person and developing a connection and maintaining a connection takes effort. It's not.
And the idea here with this video and idea is to understand that as we meet new people and they're different than us, that it is that idea to be aware that we do have biases, that maybe what I expect in a friendship or the way something works, or a colleague, the way they work, is going to be one way. But it's that ability to sort of identify that what are my expectations, and why don't I just can I just let go of those and see what else is going on, right? So we can choose to see a situation. We can choose to be curious. We can choose to trust. We can choose to be humble. We can choose to have, to be uncomfortable. I go to many events on my own, and business events, because it's been the way it is. And, to walk into a room by myself, even though I've done it many, many times, I don't know if it ever gets easy, but I never want to not stretch myself. Like, I never know who the great person is I'm going to get to sit beside. And I likely would never have talked to them the same way if I had a friend with me. And I always try and remember that. It's not easy to walk into those rooms often on my own, but it's my own bias of wanting to really explore and be comfortable and stretch myself is what I'm looking for, right?
Mm.
I
Yeah,
don't know if
and
that takes us a different path. I apologize, but
well, no, I don't think it does. I think what I do know is that we're kind of around our 20 minutes
yes,
mark, and we said we were going to kind of see
you
what
have
we
two
could
you have two people here who can chat forever, and we
do.
absolutely love each other's company. So that's why we give ourselves time limits when we work
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
Otherwise, we might not get anything else done during the day. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, we want people to have a look at the video
yep,
and you know, comment if you want to, and come back to us. And we're going to be doing more of these.
yep.
And there are some more discussions that are happening with you know, us and other of our colleagues at Change Innovators that you can sign up to on our website. And we'd just be really, really interested to hear from people and connect with us. Let's get some human connection going, eh, Dawna?
Sounds like a plan to me. Sounds like a plan to me. Thanks very much. This has been wonderful as always.
Yeah, okay. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.